Okay, let's dive into this. The news right now is pretty intense. We're hearing about an alleged Indian missile strike near the Pakistan border, early May 2025.
And Pakistan's reaction was, well, immediate, a vow to retaliate.
Which is, incredibly worrying when you're talking about two nuclear-armed states. The potential for things to go catastrophically wrong is just, it's right there.
Absolutely. The margin for error is wafer thin. Any misstep, any misread, it could escalate so fast into something nobody actually wants.
So that's our goal for this deep dive, right? To get behind those headlines. We need to unpack the history here, the immediate triggers for this incident.
The potential scenarios, yeah. How is the world reacting? What could this mean long-term for the region?
Exactly. We want to help you get a handle on what's really a critical global flashpoint, and quickly.
And we're basing this on a pretty detailed article that lays out the context and offers some solid analysis. It's not just a single event in isolation.
Right. It never is with India and Pakistan. So let's maybe take a step back. This didn't just happen out of the blue. There's a long, long history involved.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you really have to go back to the partition in 1947, India and Pakistan's creation. That event itself, the violence, the mass migrations, it left these incredibly deep scars.
Scars that shaped everything that came after. And it wasn't long before actual wars broke out.
Not at all. The first Kashmir War, right after partition, 1947-48, that really cemented Kashmir as the major point of contention. It's still central today.
Then you had the 65 War and the 71 War.
Right, and 71 led to Bangladesh's creation. That just, further entrenched the hostility between India and Pakistan.
And then fast forward to 1998, the nuclear tests.
A massive shift. Suddenly, both countries had nuclear weapons. The whole world was, understandably, alarmed.
It raised the stakes astronomically.
It really did. Because now any major conflict carried this unthinkable risk. And we saw how close it could get just a year later with the Kargil War in 99.
Yeah, I remember that. Many analysts thought that was terrifyingly close to a nuclear flashpoint.
It really felt like it. And since then, it's just been, one thing after another, keeping tensions simmering.
Like the Indian parliament attack in 2001.
Yes, and the awful Mumbai attacks in 2008. Huge setbacks for any kind of peace process.
Then more recently, the Balakot airstrike in 2019.
That was significant, the first time warplanes across the border in decades. And even between then and now, 2020 to 2024, constant ceasefire violations, skirmishes along the border.
So that's kind of pressure cooker.
Right.
And when this alleged missile strike happens in May 2025.
The reaction is explosive because there's just so much history, so much mistrust built up. Any spark can ignite something much bigger.
Okay, so let's focus on this current crisis. What are the specifics of the alleged Indian strike? What are we actually hearing?
Well, the reports point to an Indian missile hitting near the Sialkot border area, early May. The stated targets or suspected targets were supposedly militant camps. Jaish-e-Mohammed, JAM, was mentioned specifically.
But India hasn't officially confirmed this.
No official confirmation from the Indian government. But some analysts are floating the idea it might have been a preemptive strike, trying to hit militants before they could act.
Wow, a preemptive strike in that environment. That's playing with fire. So how did Pakistan respond publicly? It sounds like it was strong.
Oh, very strong. Their military denounced it immediately, called it a blatant violation of sovereignty. And Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif himself promised a swift and decisive response.
And you saw that reflected online, too.
Absolutely. The hashtag Pakistan Strikes Back started trending almost immediately. Huge surge of nationalist feeling, public pressure to retaliate.
But amidst all the rhetoric, what was actually confirmed on the ground? Was there clear information?
That's where it gets murky. Local reports mentioned hearing explosions. But crucially, no confirmed casualties initially. You had Indian media calling it defensive, Pakistani media calling it unprovoked aggression.
The usual conflicting narratives.
Exactly. A real fog of war situation, very little independent verification early on.
Okay, so Pakistan vows this swift and decisive response. What does that actually look like? What are their options?
Well, there's a spectrum. They could go the diplomatic route, the economic route, or military.
Let's start with diplomatic and economic. What could they do there?
Things like expelling Indian diplomats.
Yeah.
Maybe imposing some trade sanctions, though trade is already limited. They could also try to rally international support, take it to the UN Security Council, try to get condemnation.
Okay, those are more symbolic, perhaps. What about military options? Still short of all-out war.
Yeah, limited military responses. We could see them, stepping up cross-border shelling along the line of control in Kashmir. Which unfortunately happens fairly often anyway.
Or something more targeted?
Possibly. Maybe airstrikes on Indian military posts, something potentially mirroring India's Balakot strike from 2019, a sort of tit for tat.
But even those limited strikes carry huge risks, right? Especially with the nuclear backdrop.
That's the core fear. Both sides have short-range nuclear missiles, Pakistan's Nasser, India's Prahar. The danger is this concept of escalation dominance.
Explain that a bit.
It's this terrifying logic where, in a crisis, each side feels pressure to escalate just enough to show resolve, to not look weak. But the other side responds in kind, and you get caught in this upward spiral that neither side planned or wanted, but can't easily stop.
A cycle of retaliation getting out of control.
Precisely. Towards something unthinkable.
Are experts in the region offering any thoughts on what's likely?
There are some insights, yeah. Dr. Happyman Jacob, an Indian strategist, he emphasizes the risk of miscommunication. How easily things could spiral, even if neither Delhi nor Islamabad actually wants war.
Just through miscalculation.
Exactly. And then you have Hassan Askari, a Pakistani analyst, suggesting Pakistan's response will likely aim to be measured but firm. You know, make a point, show strength, but try not to provoke a massive escalation. A balancing act.
A very difficult balancing act. Meanwhile, the world is watching. How are other countries reacting? Any diplomatic moves?
Yeah, lots of calls for restraint, as you'd expect. The UN urged de-escalation, though some criticize them for not being forceful enough.
And the big powers, US, China.
Both called for calm. But there's always that perception, right? The US seen as maybe leaning slightly towards India, China closer to Pakistan, which can make them less effective as truly neutral mediators.
Anyone else stepping up?
Russia actually offered to mediate. They've played that role in the past, sometimes, between India and Pakistan.
And what about the economic side? These things always have ripple effects.
Oh, for sure. We saw stock markets dip in Mumbai and Karachi almost immediately. Uncertainty does that. And global oil prices ticked up too. Fears about instability in a major region. Real, tangible costs.
So looking beyond this immediate crisis, if this kind of tension just keeps simmering or worse, escalates further, what are the long-term implications for South Asia?
Well, one likely outcome is an intensified arms race. Both sides might double down on missile development, drones.
Newer technologies.
Maybe even things like hypersonic missiles eventually. It becomes this cycle of seeking strategic advantage through more advanced weaponry.
And caught in the middle, as always, the people of Kashmir.
Absolutely. Their suffering just continues. The situation there is already tense, especially since India revoked Article 370 back in 2019. That decision itself is a major source of friction fueling these crises.
And there's always that background fear of accidental war, like that Pakistani missile accidentally landing in India in 2022.
That was such a chilling reminder. A technical glitch, a human error, in this environment, it could trigger something devastating. And now you have to add cyber warfare into the mix as another potential flashpoint, another way things could escalate unexpectedly.
It sounds incredibly bleak, but is a full-scale war inevitable? Are there reasons to think it might not happen?
There are definitely counter-arguments. I mean, the economic cost of a major war for both India and Pakistan would be absolutely crippling. They both know that.
A powerful deterrent.
A very powerful one. And history does show that even severe crises, like the big military standoff in 2001-2002, have been resolved diplomatically in the past.
Right.
There are mechanisms, sometimes back channels.
There are also forces pushing the other way.
Yes. Rising nationalism in both countries is a big one. It can make it politically harder for leaders to back down or compromise.
Public pressure.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then there's the constant danger of non-state actors, militant groups, carrying out an attack that forces the government's hands, provoking a response that spirals.
So it really feels like we're balanced on a knife edge. This 2025 incident, whether it was a deliberate strike or something else, it's just a stark reminder of how incredibly volatile this relationship is.
That really is the key takeaway, isn't it? You have this deep history, these unresolved disputes, creating this constant potential for conflict. Pakistan's vow to respond opens up possibilities from diplomacy to military action, all carrying risks.
Which makes international diplomacy
absolutely critical. Proactive, sustained engagement is probably the only way to manage these tensions and try to prevent the worst-case scenario.
So as we wrap up, it leaves us with a really fundamental question, thinking about this long history and the current danger. What do you, listening, think are the most critical factors? What will decide if India and Pakistan ultimately find peace, or if conflict continues? Is it about leadership, diplomacy, just sheer luck and restraint?
And maybe dig a bit deeper with these questions from our source material. How well are the current diplomatic tools, like back-channel talks, actually working to prevent conflict? What should the big powers, the US and China, really be doing? Could building stronger economic ties, maybe resuming trade, actually make war less likely?
Serious questions to think about long after this deep dive ends.